So today I wanted to talk about, I wanted to do like a broad overview of what my research is about.
Research, huh? Sounds great. So I guess you're going to look at all of the economic data and not just go with long-debunked talking points from one side's political rhetoric, right?
I focus mostly on neoliberal conservation, or basically why neoliberal conservation is like hopelessly futile and unsustainable and just horrible in so many ways.
This is gonna be great.
For any good discussion of neoliberalism, I'm going to start with capitalism and look at the relationship between capitalism and environmental degradation, or the environmental crises that we're facing today.
Yeah, but with capitalism, you actually get a better environment.
So as I've mentioned in other videos, profit is only generated in a capitalist society through exploitation.
Yeah, Marxist talking points, nothing more. In capitalism, profit is generated through interactions that increase wealth for both sides. Both sides feel that the reward they get from the interaction, including that of worker-employer interactions, is greater than the costs they put into it. That's inevitable with any voluntary exchange. Both sides come away better. And that's how you create wealth.
Capital is obviously produced in part by digging up resources, turning them into goods or commodities, and distributing them around the globe, usually relying on fossil fuel energy to produce and distribute this, so obviously contributing to climate change on like a big scale.
Capitalism wants to use nuclear to do this. Your wonderful governments keep getting in the way. Even though it's not only the safest and most efficient form of power we have, it's also 100% carbon free. But are you going to start advocating for nuclear power? If not, then I don't want to hear one word you have to say about global warming.
So, this large-scale global environmental degradation really started to occur during the Industrial Revolution.
We've been changing the planet and affecting the climate for 8,000 years. Farming, irrigation, and other practices have literally changed land and climate all over the planet. What capitalism did was start to make things more efficient. So before capitalism, people were cutting down trees all over the place. Now, there are almost 4 times as many trees in the United States as there were 100 years ago. And most of the benefit has come from capitalist corporations, paper and logging companies who have an incentive to keep a sustainable forest going in order to ensure future profitability. They're much better well kept than government-owned forests.
And by the way, these industrializing nations like in Europe wouldn't have got anywhere if they weren't exploiting the colonies.
Notice how she loves using the word exploiting. Marxists love that word. It doesn't actually mean anything, but it sounds bad.
So exploiting basically slave labor in the colonies.
Slave labor is anti-capitalism. Capitalism is about voluntary exchange. Slavery has existed for thousands of years. It didn't just show up when capitalism came along. In fact, it was only with the advent of capitalism that people started talking about ending it. There was no anti-slavery movement and no intellectuals talking about the evils of slavery prior to the 17th century.
And of course, production and consumption being organized around competition. Competition basically forces even the most environmentally conscious and socially responsible capitalists to put that downward pressure on costs.
There are other incentives involved, Well, actually, it seems like you don't. That incentive you just mentioned is countered by loss aversion, like I mentioned earlier, wanting to secure future profitability and avoid future losses. Capitalists have the incentive to think decades ahead. Politicians have no incentive to think past the next election.
Another reason that capitalism as a system is so inherently destructive is because it relies on exchange values, not inherent use values. So, what I mean by that is like, let's say I need a chair. I go and I have one chair made by someone who makes a chair, and perhaps I produce something of value that that person wants, something like that, right? We're not producing things based on need.
But who decides what people need? Value is subjective.
We're producing things based on exchange value. And so we're producing like millions and millions and millions of chairs, or millions and millions and millions of whatever the hell we're creating.
And if people didn't want or need shares or whatever, they wouldn't be produced because no one would buy them. Every producer would love to sell twice as many of whatever their product is, but there's this little balancing act called supply and demand, which apparently Mexie is completely ignorant of.
So big corporations, produce vast amounts of things that we don't really need.
Then why do people keep buying them?
And then there's the whole bit about, planned obsolescence.
My alter ego already debunked this in a quickie. See the link in the description.
I'll link below a really good lecture by David Harvey.
David Harvey! Well, there's your problem. For people who don't know, David Harvey is a lecturer on Karl Marx. He's an anthropologist with no economic training whatsoever.
The system has to continually be in motion and continually grow in order to avoid just catastrophic crises or slow down stagnation, etc., etc.
All of that is the fault of your precious government. Capitalism doesn't have to grow. It just has to keep interacting voluntarily among people. The only reason we have to grow is because government keeps inflating currencies to steal wealth from the people, and so the market has to grow along with it to maintain wealth. Anyone well-versed in business cycle theory can confirm this. All of these crises, from the Great Depression to the housing crisis, were caused by government meddling in the economy.
It's very obvious even just thinking about a system like that based on continual growth.
You mean like Marxism? And how it ends up being mathematically unsustainable because there's only so much wealth you can redistribute, and the more you redistribute, the more you need to get from somewhere?
Something like that is never really going to be sustainable on a finite planet with finite resources.
Capitalism is the only thing that can be sustainable on a planet with finite resources, because it's the only system that can deal with issues of scarcity.
So anyway, capitalism, just operating as a system, runs into two main inherent crises. The first is the crisis of overproduction, as I mentioned in my previous video, which is you've saturated the market and there's no one else to buy what you're selling.
The incentive is against overproduction. If you've produced a surplus of a particular item, then, as basic supply and demand theory shows, firms lower the price to clear the surplus resources. And since the supply curve is upward sloping, that lower price causes them to scale back production.
Or you put such a downward pressure on wages that people can't afford what you're selling.
That doesn't happen. Supply and demand works in the labor market too. The wage is the equilibrium point between the two curves. If there's a downward pressure on wages, then how come Walmart and Target are in such a competition to push up starting wages? Walmart just increased its starting wage to $11 after Target did so a couple of months before. And they also gave additional bonuses and expanded benefits. You can sit in your little Marxist echo chamber and whine about capitalism all you want, but it can be debunked just by looking at what's really going on in the world.
Number two is just the attack of regulations of all kind, including environmental regulations at home. And we can see that right now with President Trump trying to repeal and remove all of these regulations that would otherwise protect people from environmental harm, like environmental justice issues, but also just climate change in general, which is an increasing concern.
Oh, he's going to get the NRC to release its stranglehold on nuclear power and allow us to build some more reactors? Sounds great. When's that going to start happening?
Number three, trade deals, so like free trade deals or world trade law or whatever.
Oh, you're against free trade, too. Another way you're just like your buddy Donald Trump. Whereas every school of economics knows that people and the environment are better off with free trade.
Look at what's happening with the bees. Nobody really valued their unpaid labor.
What are you talking about? Farmers have always paid beekeepers handsomely to set up hives near their crops to keep them pollinated. They'd never be able to keep up their current levels of production otherwise, and although we don't know what's causing colony collapse disorder, it seems to not be a single effect but a multitude of factors. The fact is that capitalism is so far the only solution we have, because beekeepers know how to breed new queens and set up new colonies. Notice how the biggest losses keep occurring in areas that are lower on the index of economic freedom.
So it's not actually about saving or restoring or, thinking about how to conduct business sustainably. It's just thinking about how to allow the current status quo of degradation and capital accumulation to keep going unfettered.
No, that's what government does. Capitalists are always thinking long-term, decades or even centuries ahead. Look at things such as wine and scotch that are aged for decades and sometimes even centuries before being sold. There are cheeses at your grocery store that began their production process more than 20 years ago. That's all the proof you need that capitalists think long-term.
I can link some good articles below.
I doubt that, but I can link you to a couple of good books on the matter. One is Law, Property Rights, and Air Pollution by Murray Rothbard. Another is An Austrian Theory of Environmental Economics by Ray Cordato. For that matter, Mexie could really stand to read economics in one lesson.
They are shouldering the main burden of environmental conservation while the rich nations are not being asked to change whatsoever.
Lie! 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 Pretty much all of the UN restrictions are going against rich, developed nations which aren't producing as much pollution per capita and giving pretty much a free pass to developing nations. Take a look outside sometime, Mexie, at what's really going on.
But basically what they have in common is that they all ignore these underlying political economic reasons why degradation is happening in the first place.
The reason why is government regulation. If you want to help the environment, you want more capitalism.
How much degradation and how much emissions Coke as a company puts out in the world. It's like if you actually wanted to help the Arctic, you would actually just shut down your production.
Really? You think Coca-Cola and other companies shutting down production would help things? Even though that would just increase poverty and drive people back to the less sustainable existence they had before? You haven't thought through this for 2 seconds, have you?
Right? And again, you're not producing Coke because of its inherent use value.
There is no such thing as inherent value. Value is subjective. This is basic economics.
You're just creating a billion Cokes and then convincing people that Coke is something they really need in their life.
Boy, did you pick the wrong example, because Coke proves how wrong this is. By 1985, Coke had been losing market share to Pepsi, so they decided to change their formula and release it as New Coke. There was an immense marketing campaign to convince people that New Coke was so much better, and the company spared no expense. In a matter of days, 80% of the public was aware of New Coke, and the company's stock went up. But here's the thing, Mexie. That thing you just mentioned where companies can just convince people that they want or need something, it's a load of crap, as Coke rapidly found out. People hated the new formula. When the media did their own taste tests and opinion polls, most of the public thought New Coke was terrible. The backlash was amazing. People wrote songs about how Coke was it, parodying their slogan, Coke is it. Coke's consumer hotline was flooded with over 8,000 complaints a day, and Coke's head office ended up under a pile of nearly 40,000 protest letters. Bill Cosby, longtime face of Coke commercials, ended his relationship with the company, and you can believe that Pepsi had a field day with it all. Within a month, Coke sales had dropped like a stone. Hand in hand, the company, just 78 days after the introduction of New Coke, said they were restoring the older formula as Coca-Cola Classic. You see, Mexie, you can't just arbitrarily convince someone that they want or need something. Companies would love it if that were the case, but you have to do a lot of research and development to figure out something they actually like. And if you want another example, just look at Windows 8. Despite an intense marketing campaign which included numerous product placements in popular TV shows, the public hated it, and it resulted in not only the designer being fired, but also in the drumming out of Microsoft co-founder Steve Ballmer. And if you want still another example, look at the extremely well-marketed and much-hyped Edsel, a car that flopped its very first year of release and became a joke in the pop culture that lasted for decades. Or what about Vince McMahon's XFL, which, despite all the money poured into it, didn't catch on with football fans and only lasted one season? You can't just spend $1 billion, tell people they like something, and have it work. You have to figure out something they actually would like.
Right? But it's obviously not a necessity for life.
Oh, that's the standard? We're only supposed to do what's necessary to stay alive, but not have any of the extra things that we stay alive for? Mexie, I'm looking at your video. I see Pokemon dolls. I see pictures on the wall. I see books and comfy pillows and a plant that doesn't seem to provide you much in the way of food or even oxygen. And that's a big screen TV and how many DVDs? Are those necessities of life, Mexie? It's funny how Marxists always seem to be spoiled rich brats who talk about how it would be so great if other people would sacrifice for the greater good. Hey, if you enjoyed this video, why not hit like and subscribe? And to make sure I can produce more, support this channel on Patreon and Maker Support. And check out all the other great content here, like this video selected especially for you.